Hello and welcome to Seeing Red. It is February 19th, 2024. I am Will Leitch here as always with the great Bernie Miklasz. Follow us on Twitter, Seeing Red Pod, email seeingredpod@gmail.com. Send us questions. We got some good questions this week. Bernie, it's been a couple weeks. This is our last, we're going to be off next week. And then I hope you're ready, St. Louis and surrounding municipalities, because we're going to be weekly after that. Not next week. We're not going to be going on the 26th, but after that, we will be weekly because it's getting that time of year. They're mowing grass in Florida. I assume they probably mow grass year long. We're just not there to watch it otherwise. But the ball's popping against the glove and getting the crack in the bat, and everyone's freaking out about injuries already. And we're getting grainy videos of. Remember when they used all the videos from spring training were grainy? Now the phones are so good. All the photos look great.
No, isn't it impressive? By the way, I like our schedule. The sooner we get going every Monday, it'd be great. So a week from 2 weeks from today, we'll start like a regular rotation.
Yes.
Yeah. No, when I go to STL today, and of course they just do an extraordinary job. I mean, with all the writers, but also the photography and the video work. I mean, it's really great, really, really impressive. But, I have to check to see who's taking the photos because, Derek Gould has become quite the photographer.
Yeah, he's always got that artistic bent. Anyway. He
does.
So, yeah.
It's really, really good. I mean, and listen, his stuff's always, like, in terms of his photos, I mean, he's always had a kind of a knack for that, but he's really good. I mean, I give him a lot of credit. So,
see, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole on this, but, like, I have heard so many reporters as the job changes. And as the beat reporters, the job changes. Older guys kind of complain. They're like, we didn't have to do this. I wrote my game stories in the notebook on Wednesdays, right? And to see someone like Gould, who is constantly embracing the new parts of his job and getting excited about new ways to cover the beat for the readers is, I don't know. I mean, that I wouldn't call him an old dog.
No,
because we're all, you and I, Bernie, you just had a birthday, for crying out loud. So
yeah, I know.
So we're still young. So I'm not calling him an old dog, but certainly it's exciting. One of the many reasons I think that we are, as Cardinal fans, blessed to have someone like Daryl, and not just him. Lynn Worthy does a good job, and Katie Wu does a good job, and I'm not saying that people don't do a great job.
John Denton,
John Denton does a great job. My colleague John Denton, like there's a lot of people that do great jobs, and even like some other guys, like John Jones does a good job. Like I'm not saying that guys don't do a good job in Schaefer, but like Gould is different and special. And I really firmly believe that Gould is as good as a beat reporter as you will find.
No doubt.
He's not classified as a beat reporter anymore. He's just baseball writer guy.
It just seems like they don't give him the title, but he seems like senior.
Yeah. I mean, like he's a Speak Award winner someday. He's clearly going to win a Speak.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. He reminded me, like maybe the last thing on Derek Gould, but I love talking about my friends. So that's cool. Longtime colleague. It kind of floored me when he mentioned on my radio show last week. I believe he said, and Derek, if you're listening, because I think he listens to us every now and then.
He damn well better.
Yeah. I think he said that this is like his 20th year, covering Cardinals baseball. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. 20 years. I mean, seriously, it all adds up. It is 20 years. So.
This was my disturbing thing when I was at the Super Bowl last week. I realized it was my 12th Super Bowl. And I was like, my God, I've gone to 12 Super Bowls. I'm so old. But no, distinguished.
Yeah.
Anyway, so happy birthday. I hope you had a good birthday last week.
Yeah, it was good. I feel 65, I guess, in some ways. I don't even know what that means, but, listen, everything. As long as I keep writing, I'm good. If I keep writing and talking, I'm good.
Exactly. You can destroy every part of my body, but leave my fingers alone.
That's right. That's right.
So I've been reading all your stuff, obviously, on Scoop Standing Mac and reading everything you're doing. I'm curious, any takeaways so far? It's spring training. We haven't had any games yet. It's very exciting, by the way. I looked at my MLB app, and there's going to be actual games. Very, very cool. The Cardinals first play on Saturday. We're seeing the early rumblings, guys, stepping up, guys. I thought Katie Wu did a really good piece on some interesting bullpen pieces that are kind of starting to emerge a little bit. I thought that was interesting. Lots of talk I find interesting from Nolan Arenado this offseason. I was just on MLB Network before we went on. I was on MLB Network this morning talking to Matt Vasgersian and company. And they had a whole thing about Nolan Arenado, and specifically the idea he feels like he is playing for his job again, needs to be like in the early days of Colorado. I find that not interesting that he says that, because spring training people say that all the time. But the fact that, like, honestly, I do feel like that is good news. I don't know if he's actually going to play better, but the idea last year seemed to have not as much urgency from some of the veteran dudes as you might have liked. There seemed to be a lot of, well, that guy's not catching the way I'm used to, or that's what we do here in St. Louis, we win. A little bit of a shakeup. I like what do we want from last year? The horrific disaster that was last year. We want them to understand that something has to change, that is unacceptable. We'll see how Arenado actually performs, but I'm glad he was alarmed by last year, because I was pretty alarmed by last year too.
He was very miserable guy last season. And I can understand it. I mean, he came here to St. Louis because he wanted to get away from the Colorado Rockies, and then the last year he had
He played for the Colorado Rockies again.
a Colorado Rockies season. I don't blame him for being like, but he got like, he let it demoralize him and just like frustrate him and tick him off, and he was he was a very grumpy guy around the clubhouse, and I think. The one thing about him, I mean, the one thing, the story that they all the beat writers wrote, there was a quote in there about Arenado when he was talking about last year, the clubhouse, and he was talking about how the young guys were kind of like, running the place or running wild or something. And, and he pointed out how he and Goldie aren't real vocal and blah, blah, blah. And I was, that kind of jolted me, because this idea that, how you and I talked about this the last time, but how freaking bad was that clubhouse last year? Where, well, and I don't know. Listen, I think a happy clubhouse is good for your team. Tony La Russa always said to me, a happy clubhouse, like, that's not the reason you win, but if you have a good clubhouse, it absolutely helps you during hard times. It can make a huge difference. You stick together, you don't fall apart. So, but I don't know what this means for this year, though. Does this mean Arenado and Goldschmidt are going to try to step up a little bit? Or are they going to, or in terms of being leaders, or being more vocal, be more proactive? And I'm starting to understand why they really wanted to bring Matt Carpenter back. I'm not justifying it as a baseball decision, but apparently the issues down there were a lot more extreme than we ever would have imagined, because I think we in the media, and that's everybody, we tend to go overboard on the clubhouse culture stuff. I mean, the word's overused. But yeah, they obviously had some issues down there. I don't think there's any question about it. I'm hoping that this year, in addition to being a better player, and I think he will be, talking about Arenado, and I'm really convinced Goldie will have better numbers, because all his underlying metrics, and like Baseball Savant, StatCast stuff, shows that he lost nothing as far as that stuff. But I hope that they find a way, maybe they're uncomfortable being the so-called leaders as far as speaking up, but I hope they find a way to kind of raise their voice and just maybe be a little more aggressive in that area, because I think it will help. But I also think some of those young veterans are starting to step up too. And we've talked about Brendan Donovan. He wants to be a leader. And I think Carpenter will be good for that cause. I do, because he's been around. His teammates have always loved him, and I think he's like a great touchstone type of guy to have around. So we'll see. But I know as I say that, some of our dear listeners are just wincing. But try to understand what I'm saying. It's they had to remedy this, and they obviously feel he can help them do that. So one other thing, but you mentioned the bullpen. And it's not, all due respect to the writers, it's not because of the writers sort of talking up the bullpen early. I've been, the more and more I learn about some of the pitchers they brought in, and are they no-name pitchers, so to speak, in terms of St. Louis knowledge? We always pay attention to what we have here. They're not big name guys, but you're seeing the Chaim Bloom effect.
Right.
He identified all these guys and basically told the Cardinals, hey, you want to get these guys if you can get them cheap. They each have something that can be translated into really positive results. And I'm feeling a lot better about the bullpen than I would have, say, a month ago, and part of that is them getting Kittredge and getting Middleton.
Middleton is the one as I'm personally excited.
But I think there's a lot there. They have a lot of depth in that bullpen, and they are going to have more guys who can bring it. I mean, more guys with nasty pitches. So, I'm not as hung up on like, well, they didn't spend a fortune on a reliever. I don't really care about that because some of the best bullpens the Cardinals have had during our lifetimes here as fans and observers is when they've had a bunch of young guys down there bringing it. Young guys who weren't household names at all, but guys who came through their system like Rosenthal and Segris and Carlos Martinez as a reliever, Seth Maness, guys like that. I mean, they were really, really, really good. And there was some really that 2013 bullpen might have been the best one they've had in a long time. And it was filled with rookies and guys who were sort of no names. So I'm trying to get off of that thing where you don't have to be a name guy for me to say, you know what, I think there's something good there. I think that can work. They need to do that in a major way because the impact of younger arms in their bullpen has really been diminishing. It used to be a strength.
Well, and it's funny because I agree. I don't think it's smart to go spend a lot on bullpens. I think this is exactly the Bloom thing. Is the idea you find guys that can help. I think Kittredge and Middleton, I think are like I feel good about those two. Those are good ads, and that's not even getting down to some of the guys who may or may not stick in there. But to me, the argument there is I agree that you don't do that, but like I'm glad they didn't go spend a bunch of money on, say, Aroldis Chapman, for example, for the bullpen, the name to feel better. I think Hader is super overpaid, to be entirely honest. Like, I think Hader is really good, and maybe it's the top of the market guy that makes a big difference, but relievers,
They're
like
volatile. They're volatile.
listen, it's possible Hader is one of those special guys. There
Sure.
usually is one special guy every 5 or 6 years or so, and maybe it's Hader. It certainly could be Hader. But if it's not Hader, I'm glad they didn't go spend a bunch of money on Chapman or Kimbrel or something like that. However, I would actually still love the bullpen can be as great as you want if Steven Matz can't hold up, or if Miles Michaelis isn't better than he was last year, or if Lance Lynn gives up 40 homers again. The bullpen is going to collapse because no matter how good those arms are, because they're going to have to make up for the starting pitching. I mean, there were times the bullpen was not good last year, but there were some success stories last year. Jojo Romero was a great success story for them last year. Helsley was good when he pitched, and then I think you're going into this season trying to figure that out. But like the bullpen was not good last year, but the reason everything fell apart last year was the starting pitching. And for me, the argument I think it's been very smart the way they've constructed the bullpen. I like the guys they've got. It doesn't feel like there's anything they've given up, anything that they would miss for that. Middleton didn't cost too much. I think Gallegos is still a massive, massive question mark, and they seem to be counting on him more than I'm necessarily comfortable with him counting on them. But I get it, right? I get the idea that you give Gallegos another run, though he's already 32, by the way. He's going to be 33 like around the All-Star break. So he's older than I think sometimes people think that he is. But on the whole, I get doing the cheap bullpen mount, but for me, that's an argument to get another starting pitcher. Because the starting pitcher, to me, that's where your money, with the way this team is constructed, the way you spend money in a way that doesn't seem like it's going to hurt you that badly is to go starting pitching. And I don't mean go lower brow, get the next Steven Matz. To me, listen, it's been written before. Ben Fredrickson's written about this for the Post-Dispatch. We've talked about it. To me, we'll see what happens with Boris, with the 4 clients he still has waiting. I still hope they're just keeping an eye on a Jordan Montgomery. Because to me, when I look at this offense, and I am excited about, we talked about Arenado's leadership. You know what I would really like to see Arenado do is hit better.
Yeah.
Like he had an OPS of 109 last year. That's unacceptable.
I know.
Never mind, it's unacceptable for your star player. It's unacceptable for your cleanup guy. It's unacceptable for your team leader. It's unacceptable for a guy that clearly took a step back, at least in the first half, defensively next year. Like Arenado needs to forget leadership. He needs to be better. Like he needs to be better. And I think there's a lot of these guys where you can see, I agree with you about Goldschmidt. I agree with you about, I think Newtbar, it seems like someone, if he can stay healthy, get there. I am now pretty much almost officially fully on board of Jordan Walker's going to be a badass this year. Like I'm fully ready for that. I think Gorman could be that. There's a reason.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think, and I think
those two are going to have big years.
And I think Wynn's going to be fine hitting by, like, I think it's going to come around. Like, I think Keith Law has me fully on board on Mason Wynn being able to hit. All of those things can come into place. All that stuff can work. The bullpen can hold. if Steven Matz gets hurt or can't pitch, which certainly seems like a very real possibility, if Miles Michaelis isn't what he was last year, if Lance Lynn gives up 40 homers, it's as glad as I am that they got their explicit 3 starting pitchers that they claimed they were going to get. If this team falls apart, it will be because of the rotation. So if you're going to spend, if you're not going to spend money on the bullpen, which I think is smart, I still feel like they need another starting pitcher, and that's the thing that worries me more than anything.
Yeah, they do. I would. I'm always in a tough spot here, not with you, but with just in talking about this in general, because who would disagree? Who would really disagree with the idea they need another starting pitcher? Someone who's
there's not a team in baseball that's like, no, thanks,
Yeah.
we're full, we're set.
But I mean, even in St. Louis, like, of course, no one disagrees with the premise that they could Jordan Montgomery would make him better. Of course, I mean, needless to say,
Right.
he's the only decent starting pitcher they had last year, and he was really good. He was very good as a Cardinal, but. I just, it ain't going to happen. I don't, and I hope I'm wrong. So I just can't, it's hard for me to discuss without, sounding like the crankiest, crabbiest, grouchiest guy there is. It's a wonderful thing. The idea is wonderful, right? But from a pragmatic standpoint, is it going to happen? I would say it is an extreme long shot.
I don't want to give him too much credit for being, I would say, correctly smart about not spending a ton of money in the bullpen. But then, like, yay, congratulations, you saved yourself some money. I still want you to use it. And like, for me, it's an allocation of resources. And I believe they deserve praise. And I think Bloom is at the center of that. Unless whatever, like, it's not like Bloom came in and Michael Gersh was like, oh, sir, I'm sorry, I will be quiet. I will say nothing. I will let you lead. Like, I'm sure everyone's involved in these. And I think because Bloom did that with the Rays and to a lesser extent the Red Sox, I think there's an idea that like he came in and said, hey guys, cheap young pitchers in the bullpen is smart. Cheap pitchers in the bullpen is smart. Don't spend a lot of money on it. I'm sure Michael Gersh and John Mozeliak have heard of that before, but I do think that's a Bloom thing. So I think they deserve credit for that. But the problem is, it feels weird to credit them for literally just saving money. What I really want them to do is use the money they saved on the bullpen to focus on the things that, to me, clearly still need a little bit of work.
Well, I think, say I look at it a different way with the bullpen. I think that just a general principle, the recent history. I mean, I'm talking about all across Major League Baseball. Bullpens are volatile. Bullpens are loaded with guys who are pitching really well, and then they just break and they're gone, and that's it. Career's over, or career's hopelessly sidetracked. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to invest heavily in your bullpen. And let's face it, some of the hugest mistakes John Mozeliak has made has been throwing a lot of money at the bullpen. I mean, Brett Cecil, Greg Holland, Andrew Miller. I mean, there's other guys. I mean, some of the worst contracts they dished out is when they tried to buy a bullpen. I think what I like about it, I'm not impressed that they didn't spend money on the bullpen, because I think it just makes sense to, if you have someone like a Chaim Bloom who's really good at this, he can identify what makes a guy potentially very, very good and certainly worthy of an opportunity. And a lot of it is just making sure that these guys throw their best pitches instead of fooling around. And they, to me, it's the Chaim Bloom effect combined with they've gotten out of this trap of just being stupid about throwing money around on relievers who never live up to it. So I don't know that I'm giving them credit. I'm just saying, to me, it's an overdue change. To me, it's an indication that they're finally understanding the big picture about bullpens. It's not so much I'm counting dollars. It's just from a philosophy is what I'm talking about. So their philosophy is more advanced. It's more forward thinking. It's more in touch with the way baseball has been trending as far as roster construction with your bullpen. That's what I like. I like what it represents because it's overdue. It's one of the reasons why they were throwing money around and burning it up on relievers who just weren't that good, but they were making huge money. So I'm fine with it because philosophically they needed to evolve. That's something we've all hollered about. And this is an indication that they have evolved in this, at least in this one area, plus all the stuff that's going on with the technology and everything. I mean, that's encouraging too. It's better late than never. Yeah, they don't get like man of the year awards because they're finally taking the steps to catch up to the industry in terms of advanced analysis and teaching and concepts and everything else when it has to do with pitching, where they were way behind. And so they don't get awards for that, but it's like it's about time, and I welcome the fact that they are trying to catch up finally.
Yeah, and I agree, and I just for me, it's just I know that they're not going to go get Jordan Montgomery unless the price really falls, and I don't see that happening.
Hey, let me
Yeah,
ask you this. Let me ask you the one thing I'm looking at the starting pitching. And yes, they definitely could benefit from Jordan Montgomery. No, nobody of sane mind would say no to that. However, you know what? You know what I think is maybe a little quiet is that the depth that they have behind their starting pitching to me is pretty encouraging because last year they had none. They had no depth. There was nothing. In 2021, they had to go out and get two starting pitchers at the deadline because they had no depth in the system. In 2022, they did the same thing. And again, they were really good moves, Montgomery and Quintana. But again, they did not have any depth in the organization. They could bring a guy up and feel really good about it. Last year, they hit rock bottom. There was no one, and I mean no one, that they could bring in and give a starting job to. I'm not saying that the guys they have behind their five, I'm not saying, oh man, these guys are all all-star. I'm not saying that. But actually, to me, the depth should be a source of optimism because it's in much better shape than it was before, and that matters. That really does matter. I'm not saying, well, you bypassed Jordan Montgomery because of that. They're not going to sign him anyway. So I'm not arguing like, well, you don't need to sign him because you have this guy. You have 4 or 5 guys now who look like they could be major league starting pitchers, and they feel good about. I'm not saying it's like you do that instead of going for Montgomery. But I'm just saying if you're not going to go for Montgomery and they're not, um, they have a lot more behind their five than they have in a while, and I for one think that's a very good thing.
yeah, and I will say one thing I do like that they're doing this spring, and Katie Wu talked about this in her notebook a little bit, is Liberator. He is being stretched out as a start. Now, he may end up becoming a swing guy, though you never really see swing guys. I always say they're swing guys, and I guess like sometimes, I guess Palante's kind of been that, and Thompson's kind of been that, but, and as she points out, the season starts with a pretty harrowing early schedule to the point where they might want to touch on a brief 6-man rotation sort of idea. I've read, Dane Perry talked about this, about the idea, the excitement for Liberator in the bullpen. I'm glad they're giving one more shot for Liberator in the rotation. I think Thompson may ultimately be the shorter term right thing on that. But to me, the upside on Liberator, I feel like he's gotten one more run. You've got to give a young guy like that one more run with the stuff that he has. If he doesn't have it now, fine. You're a bullpen guy, you're a swing guy, you're what Andrew Miller was supposed to be, that kind of idea. But I think that like with guys like Tien Kent's coming and Graceffa and McGreevy and some of those guys, Liberator to me the thing that makes me feel a little better is the idea. Like, I'm very worried about Matson. I'm much more, again, I know there's the stories about how Michaelis is trying some new stuff and he's working on a slider and so on. I'll believe it when I see it. I'm worried about both of those guys considerably. Liberator is someone I find myself not ready. Maybe he's my pitching Dylan Carlson. But like, he's the guy I'm not ready to let go of yet.
Yeah, listen, it's there. It's there. He just needs to have that kind of that attack mentality we saw when he pitched that near masterpiece down at Tampa Bay last year. So he's a little bit of a puzzle to me. But yeah, I think it's premature to give up on him. And and Zach Thompson, if you look at really what he's done, and this is kind of, I think just Zach Thompson, if I could mention the one guy that I think represents the point I'm trying to make about they have better depth behind their starting five. I get into it with some associates, in a good natured way, but it's kind of like, there's this tendency, Zach Thompson, because he's not a big name guy and not a guy that, they spent, $23 million a year on, that, he should be brushed aside. And it's just like, well, hold on now. You drafted him in the first round. You've developed him. By the way, you've messed with him. Yo-yoing him like, is he a reliever? No, he's a starter. No, he's a reliever. No, he's a starter. No, he's a reliever. They've like tried to screw the guy up in every which way possible. And yet you look at, well, all things considered, how well he's pitched. You're like, well, I don't know. Let's take a look around Major League Baseball. Let's look at so-called number 6 starters, right? How many What do people think a number 6 starter should be? I mean, and my point is like Zach Thompson, I think last year, you look at his ERA in the majors, you look at his ERA as a starting pitcher, and that was even a little distorted because he had 2 bad starts at the end of last year. Zach Thompson is a perfectly fine number 6 starting pitcher, Like, isn't that the whole point of drafting guys in the first round? Because you feel they can play a role. So I think there needs to be a little more acknowledgement of the depth behind the 5. We can fuss about the 5. There's no reason not to fuss about the 5. And so you can find the stuff in all those guys really that give you concern. But they have more backup now. And you and I read the same people, there's pretty much throughout the prospect industry. Everybody really likes Tekoa Roby,
Yeah.
that's a hell of a pickup. I mean, that's a better starting pitching prospect than they've had in the organization for a while. Tink Hence excluded. He's stalled a little bit, but he certainly can do it. But a Tekoa Roby has not existed in their farm system for quite a while. I mean, they now have 2 or 3 guys, 4 guys that they can call on to start in the major leagues. And I'm not saying they're front rotation guys, but I'm just saying if you need a 5th starter, they have plenty of guys in back of those the first 5. I really they didn't have them before. Now they have some of those guys, and I like that. That's again, it's a sign of stepping forward and progressing. And the best thing for the Cardinals to do, and it doesn't really mollify concerns over 2024. The number one reason why the Cardinals were in a state of collapse last year is, I've said a million times, that what used to be their strength, the drafting and the development of pitchers, particularly starting pitchers, that was a strength for a long time, and then it became a hideous weakness, and the bridge fell down, the bridge collapsed. They need to get back to developing their own pitchers and doing a good job and being an industry leader. So I think they're starting to take some steps in that direction, and it's about time.
Yeah, I just hope everybody, I hope 2024 goes well. So all the people that are making the decisions of putting the things forward in motion for the pitchers to be better in the future are still around, because they might not be. If that's what I'm getting back to, is the idea that 2024 to me strikes me as incredibly urgent for not just, listen, obviously Ali Marmol, it's very urgent for him. I think the first 2 months are very urgent for Ali Marmol, but I think for John Mozeliak, for Michael Kirsch, for Heim Bloom, for how much we trust the DeWitts, like there's a lot, like there is a massive amount of skepticism involving the Cardinals after what happened last year. And
Well, of course.
and there should be.
But it doesn't mean you do stupid things.
It doesn't mean these stupid things, but it does mean that, like, if there is, it just feels like if this, like, let's put it this way. I agree with what you're saying about all the pitching for the future, and I agree that they're in better position, and I like some of these young pitchers. I like the fact, here's a prediction: Drew Rom never starts a game for the Cardinals again. I feel comfortable making that tradition. Not to say that he's like a useless player or anything, but he sure feels like he's upside Jojo Romero in a couple of years. And certainly, like, my Oriole friends were not like, no, not Rom. So, though he was awesome against the Orioles last year, actually. But anyway, the point is that, like, all these things that I think are being well put into place, and I think you're smart, I think you're right, and they're working on these young pitchers. None of that if they have the season this year that they had last year, the reckoning, I would argue, will sweep a lot of that away. And that's the thing I'm worried about, is not like the car, like we can all, if you're asking me what I think I've made predictions for this season yet, but I do not think that this year will be a repeat of last year. For what it's worth,
I hope not.
I did not think last year was going to happen either. For what it's worth, so don't listen to me about anything. But certainly, I do think that moves have been made to make it less likely that the shit show that happened last year will be repeated. But if it is repeated, I mean, it's hard to even construct all the ramifications if they were to have a season that's just, and we know that it can happen. It just did. It just happened. If that happens again, and if that happened, to me, when I look at this team, the way that happens is the starting pitching collapsing. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
and if that happens, I don't think it's going to matter that much that they're getting a little bit more it's gonna matter if, like, I'm still gonna be watching them in 5 years. I'm just not sure John Mozeliak's the guy making that decision, or Michael Gersh is making that decision, or Chaim Bloom's making that decision, and I certainly don't think Ali Marmol is gonna be a part of that. And so I know this is always the balance that teams have, and the Cardinals have always done this balance very well in the past of how much is the short term compared to the long term. To me, the big question that I still am wondering, do they understand how, like, while these long term moves I get and are smart, the short term urgency is higher than it has been that I can remember as a Cardinals fan.
Well, yeah, but so they have a lot to prove on the field. I like a lot. I like a lot of the things that they've done, and I don't think there's any question they'll be a better team. It's just a question how high do they get over that 500 bar? And it doesn't. And I feel like, but by now I'm tired of hearing myself talk about it because as much as I talk about it. No one wants to acknowledge it because people are so angry, including media people. I mean, but so I talk about this all the time and write about it all the time. If you win 85, 86 games, and let me cut this off at the pass. I'm not saying that's your goal. That should not be your goal. If you win 85, 86 games, you're right in the middle of everything. And all you got to do is look up what's happened in the recent years, especially since you added the extra wild card team. The last three National League champions, the last three pennant winners, average 86 and a half wins. So this idea that, we got to build a roster that's going to go. I used to believe this until I started doing research. You got to build a roster. You got to spend the money. You got to have a team that's going to be, more equipped to win in the post. I agree with that. But it also guarantees nothing. In other words, I'm not just saying that you can actually get in trouble with that way, but I want to see them be more ambitious. But I also know that it's true, and people do not want to acknowledge it. If you win 86, 87 games, you're going to be in good shape, and you have a chance. You have just as much chance to go deep into postseason as anybody else. Again, look at the results of the last 2 or 3 years, and that verifies what I'm saying. So anyway, it's look, this is a huge year for a lot of those guys. But it's sort of like Jordan Montgomery, I think is kind of symbolizes what I'm talking about. Okay. Yeah, the Cardinals, to repeat, of course they'd be better with him. The owner's not going to spend the money on him. And so the idea, like, well, if they have another bad year, boy, that's the end of the game for all these guys are going to get fired. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, because who has the final say and who's very much involved in terms of how much they're spending? Like, that's one thing I'll stick up for Mozeliak on. He absorbs all the body blows and all the abuse because they don't sign this guy, they don't spend this, they're not aggressive, they don't get that. It's not his decision. It's not his decision. It's Bill DeWitt who controls that part of their baseball decisions, how much they're going to spend. And so Mo's got to come out rather clumsily and explain their payroll and defend their payroll. And he's doing it because he works for Bill DeWitt. He doesn't have that power to put together the kind of payroll he thinks they really need, the payroll that he really wants. So I think that's important to keep in mind. I don't know.
Yeah. I just think if they go ahead.
I'm really looking forward to the start of baseball so we can get some results. I'm already like kind of, I'm in a position that's like, can we play some baseball games and just see how good or bad they are? But the thing of it is, even if they get off to a rough start because of that schedule, I mean, well, that's all we hear about is the schedule. Yeah, it's a tough schedule. But at some point in time, every team in the majors goes through tough schedules. The Cardinals haven't. I look at it as an opportunity. They win some games early because everyone expects them, apparently, to win like 2 of their first 15 or whatever. If they exceed the expectations and hold their own and play good ball and they win their share, or they go 500, or they I know it's an impossible dream. They actually go a game or two above 500 and in the first 3 weeks or so. that's a good thing. I mean, that means they've gotten a really tough part of their schedule out of the way, and it's a little bit of a smoother ride the rest of the way. I think that part can be flipped around. If they get off to a bad start, they got the whole rest of the season to recover. Okay, that's the other thing. The season's not over, not in the NL Central if you get off to a bad start. It's just not. You're going to have plenty of time to make up whatever ground you need to make up. So, but I look at it as an opportunity. I just looks like, you know what, you think you're better, you're happy with the team you have, you have a chance to show us right away. But if you come up short, I'm not going to be running around here in the Skinker to Bolivar neighborhood through the campus of Washington University, screaming that the sky's falling. I'm not going to do that either.
If you do that, it won't be because of it. I'll put it that.
That's right. That's right.
But I think you're right, and I understand that, and I also and just the two things to add on this. And I want to go back to Arenado. One thing, Arenado's thing, to kind of bring us full circle before we have a question. There's two things. One, I am glad. I would want them. I will always encourage owners to spend money. I'd rather money go to players than to owners. But that said, I don't really like. The Reds, to me, look like a team that had a real opportunity this offseason to build on their young core, and they spent some money. I just don't think they spent it very wisely. I don't really understand a lot of the Reds offseason moves. I feel like the Reds could have made a signed Dexter Fowler and John Lester sort of Cubs move in 15, 16, and they didn't. And that's encouraging to me, because that not only is encouraging for me in the short term, it's encouraging in the long term. And that, like, I was encouraged by that. So I'm glad the Cardinals didn't do that. I'm just saying that, like, there is, what's the old idea? Penny wise, pound foolish. The idea of, I'm going to put it this way: if the rotation collapses and the Cardinals are out of the playoffs in August, and nobody's at the stadium, just like last year, I'm wondering if DeWitt will wish he would have spent for George Montgomery. I'll put it that way. Is that, like, I don't know if he has to, but, like, like the what I want with what I if I'm a if what I think they should want to make sure to avoid. Like, let's say the Cardinals are 85, 86 win team this year and miss the playoffs by one game. That's going to be bad. That's going to be frustrating, and we'll see what the ramifications of that would be. But if they win 72 games, like, the shit's gonna hit the fan.
Yeah.
and that to me is the scenario you have to avoid.
I think they will.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, this is, look how much already the soft bigotry of low expectations. A Cardinals fan, are like, okay, guys, okay, let's just make sure we don't lose 90. Okay, like, it's a sad place to be, but I do feel like that's something I would have never thought possible for the Cardinals. I now think it's possible because I just saw it happen.
Their starting rotation, even with imperfections, if you want to put it that way, is substantially better than what it was last year. Substantially.
Yeah.
In terms of innings, instead of coverage, in terms of quality starts.
You're not counting on Adam Wainwright, for example.
Well, and that's again, I really do feel sometimes I just waste my time, like, writing and talking about things. The part of this equation in terms of improving is they've cleared out an incredible amount of rot. They've cleared out a lot of dead branches. I mean, and I've written about it, talked about it, I mean, ad nauseum, but it's like, it isn't just who you bring in. It's the simple reality that you have gotten rid of. There's no longer a dozen or so pitchers in this organization who were below the replacement level and way below replacement level. You've gotten rid of basically scrubs who are non-factors, except they're bad. They have cleared out so much dead wood, and they've brought in so many pieces that have upside, have legitimate upside, or in the case of some of these starters, the kind of things they needed desperately for their rotation that they didn't get last year. So just by that simple 1-2 step, clear out the dead wood, get rid of the dead branches, and then bring in some people that either can do it because they've done it before, or guys who have legitimate upside. And to me, they've done that. It's like a 2-step process. And that's why I think they're going to be a lot better than they were last season. And just a reminder, preemptively, it's a 162 game season. So again, everyone's going to be going nuts in April if it doesn't go, it's not, gangbusters right away. So I don't know. I feel better about them. And one of the reasons I do is because I did a sequence of pieces at scoops with DannyMac.com about reasons for optimism.
Mhm.
And I don't sit there and just put this stuff out there to try to be different. I wouldn't write it unless I meant it. I wouldn't talk about it unless I meant it. There's a lot of reasons to feel pretty good about this team. Um, Individual players, the firming up of the rotation, even though it may not be the rotation everybody wants per se, it's still a hell of a lot better going into this season than it was last season. I don't think there's any question about that. And they now have a cast of relievers who, yes, they need to prove it, but they have the kind of stuff, the kind of nastiness, the kind of strikeout potential that the Cardinals have not had in supply the way they will coming into this year. Now it's just a matter of getting the results.
And for the record, I feel like remind everybody, like Sonny Gray is really good. I think Sonny Gray is gonna be like a really like that's an ace they haven't had in a while. We've tried to make guys into aces. I think he's gonna be an ace. I think he's really good.
Well, the way that's the other thing. The way he's taken charge immediately,
Yeah.
and they really needed that desperately. They really, really needed that. And everyone's fallen in line behind him, including Miles Michaelis. So you're not going to see this thing where he's trying to be a leader. He's not a leader. I appreciate the effort, but he just needs to worry about his pitching. And Kyle Gibson was a great leader for the Orioles among those pitchers last year. Lance Lynn has always been a take charge guy. I love the accountability, the responsibility, people that are setting a standard. And it's going to mean a big change in the attitude. And just, I think you talk about urgency. I totally agree. They need more urgency. I think they're going to have it. I mean, you have two veterans that we talked about, Arenado and Goldschmidt, who have a lot on the line. They really do. With Arenado, it's his reputation. With Goldie, it's a new contract. You have players who are ascending and realize, hey, the big money's right around the corner. I got to just start putting up huge numbers. I mean, you got guys who I think are going to be big time breakthrough players. I'm talking about Gorman and Walker and right on down the list. I think the manager understands. Well, we got to play defense better. Yeah, yeah. Your old pal here wrote 9,000 columns on that last. So yeah, I mean, I think they get it. I think they understand where they screwed up last year, and to the best of their ability and their budget, the front office went out and took care of a lot of those problems. To the best that they could, given the financial restraints. But I think a lot of this is internal. I think a lot of it is driven internally. There's a lot of people down there. I mean, a lot of people that have things to prove. And I have no idea why they wouldn't go out and play like that, because there's a lot riding on the line, not just for the franchise, but for them each individual. There's stuff on the line. There's no question about it. And I think last year got everyone's attention.